Howdy, all you delicious people. I am here today to review The Tomorrow War. So, immediately I will say if people like movies like Starship Troopers or the movie Aliens, you'll probably enjoy this film. If you've never heard of either one of the films that I've just mentioned, then man, you missing out. Because those are actually good movies. If you have seen neither the Sigourney Weaver Aliens movie, or if you've never seen Starship Trooper and you're going into this film, you should probably go and watch those afterwards because those are actually enjoyable films. Those are actually films that do still to this day hold up. And then eventually, once you go and watch those films, you're like, oh, I get what you meant by this. The Tomorrow War is, in all actuality, like kind of what you get from the trailers is what you get from the film. Really, I kind of went through this film, and while I was watching it, I kind of found it, for the most part, kind of a predictable film. But I enjoyed it nonetheless. Like, I thought that this was a fun movie. It felt like a lot of stuff wasn't really explained, and because why would there be? Like, if you go into Starship Trooper, like, they don't really explain much in that film. They're just like, hey, like, you have to go out there and blow up and come back in X amount of days. So I liked this movie. I did enjoy it. Really, like, I can understand probably why Chris Pratt had went on to do this movie. Just because it looks like a really cool action film, and it looks like something that like he hasn't like done besides like the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of films. Like, it kind of feels like a different kind of approach of doing those kinds of things. The aliens in this movie kind of have this like almost like it kind of has this like mixture of things where it kind of has this like Dr. Octopus like Tremors slash kind of like the aliens from like Star Trek Trooper. Like, it kind of has that kind of feel to them. There's like a mixture of like the way that they all kind of look. But like they all look the same, but like it has like a mixture of all like kind of combining like things. Because I think the way they move kind of moves like the Starship Trooper kind of aliens. And so like these things like look really cool, but you have to wait like the first like I think like 45 minutes of this movie to get to that point. There's a lot of explanation, or there's a lot of just like gearing up for eventually these people to be taken and to be sent into the future. And yeah, like I think the beginning and the end of this film is just kind of very weak for me. But I think everything going on in the middle can keep you interested enough, like especially after that first 45 minutes. Like, eventually I think you'll be sold for the rest of the film after that. Even though I think the beginning is fairly weak and I think the ending is fairly weak, just because it has to like there has to be this build and then this de-escalation. And plus also just the way the movie ends is just kind of goofy. They have to come up with some kind of way of which to still have our hero take out the villain, and so they have to come up with that approach. So, with that said, yeah, like I think I think I wrapped up most of what I wanted to say in this. I enjoyed this movie. I would say that this is a pretty close to good film, which like a lot of people might have this back and forth because a lot of people will make the consensus that it's just like certain other movies, like Live, Die, and Repeat. Like, some people might say it's very similar to that in some ways, but we don't have Chris Pratt's character consistently going back into the future. But really, once like this story starts to go, I think it is kind of honestly just predictable. like there's nothing wrong with it, but like I also am just like, yeah, like I know where this is going to head. and but I had a fun adventure doing it. I was kind of interested in seeing where exactly J.K. Simmons was going to play into all this, because I quickly saw him in the trailer. I'm like, oh, okay, please let him not be just some like scientist crony guy that you barely see in this film. And I think towards the tail end of this movie, like I'm like, yeah, J.K. Simmons, awesome. Like, thank God they actually had him do something in this film, because I was kind of worried that like they were just gonna have him there as just like one of those like, hey, J.K. Simmons is in this film, for like a minute, and then like you're never gonna see him again. And like it was just like a money making scheme where they're just like, hey, look at this celebrity that's barely in this film. Hey, look at that celebrity that's barely in this film. Plus, also, like, it's a really big year, evidently, for Sam Richardson. Like, I just caught him in also another movie called Werewolves Within, and then I just went into this movie. And I'm like, oh my god, he's in this movie too. Great. I also know there was another guy who was to play Dorian. I'm like, oh my god, that's the guy from The Purge. Like, if you guys remember the very first Purge film, like eventually this guy like continues to be in the Purge movies, like here and there. And the guy who plays Dorian in this movie, who wears the red shirt, um, yeah, I was like, oh my god, that's the guy from The Purge. Like, it seems like they have a bunch of random actors here and there that I know from other things. So I thought that was really enjoyable. But a lot of these might not be big, huge named actors. Like I think there was one girl I think who plays uh, the girl from Chuck. I think I could be wrong. The girl from Chuck, I think, is in this movie as a certain kind of commander that is telling people what to do through earpieces. But yeah, like I don't want to spoil it, so eventually it's interesting where that character eventually is to play out, and we'll get to that when I get to spoilers, because I can't talk about what that character is to have importance of eventually somewhere down the road in this movie. So with that said, again, if you like Starship Troopers, or if you like the Alien Sigourney Weaver franchise, or like it's not like a very gross out film, so but like it feels similar, and that's the route which that I'm talking to you about. Is it these this movie and those feel very similar, but if anything, yeah, like let's get into the spoilers of this, because I've talked about it way for too long. But if you don't have an Amazon Prime subscription, because you may not have the money or the fees or whatever is just too much for you, go ahead and go to an app called C Movies, the letter C Movies, and check this movie out. Or you can go on to another app that I've been using fairly reliably called Fox HD Movies. The title might not be the same as the logo, but if you go to Fox HD Movies, this app will pop up fairly easily. I think the app is actual name is called like Play 1080p Movies, and so but like I just see the logo pop up fairly easily, so I find it there. So with that said, let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time to spoil this movie. So again, enjoyable movie. It's fun. Kind of wants probably to have a lot of people go back and watch another of these kind of like alien invasion kind of movies, like I just mentioned. So if anything, this might give you some heads up or reminders about some other films that you can go ahead and check out. But without a doubt, it is spoiler time. So let's go into it. So in the very beginning of this movie, we have Dan Forrester, who is to be desperate to go and try to find a job, because it seems that all of his kind of backgrounds and stuff like that would probably get him into be working for some big job to finally have his family make quite a bit of money. Because all of what Dan is doing right now is he's just being a teacher. So he's kind of looking for a more lucrative job. And so Dan is to try and like call these people even during the holidays, like while they're doing a Christmas party, so that way Dan can desperately get a job. And he is to talk to these people, and they decide to go another way with his job, to where Dan is now just flinging paperwork and chucking things everywhere just because he's just irate and just upset by like he's trying to make a real legitimate living for his family, and it's just not going anywhere. Like, and so is Dan seemingly. So Dan is to go into this party, and so him and his daughter are picking bizarrely a thing to do called watching the World Cup, the World Soccer Cup thing. Which I'm like, okay, like I guess they're trying to make this like try to be the like most universal like thing that probably everyone would watch. I guess especially if you're in certain countries, like the World Cup matters to you. Like for here, like World Cup great, but really like I am not a person that watch any kinds of sports. So anything that has to do with like I don't even watch like common like I watch football every once in a while or American football, but I like if anything I catch like World Cup things here and there, but it's not a big deal to me. But anyways, so we have these World Cup soccer players, and so they're doing their thing, and so after Dan is to hear his news, he's to eventually go and sit by his daughter and just kind of watch this World Cup because it's just like, well, like let's just enjoy the holiday because like Dan's wife is just kind of bickering at him because it's like, oh come on, like Emmy, is like, come on, like if anything, like we should be enjoying this holiday. And eventually, Emmy is just kind of frustrated that nobody's eating her like her Santa tuna meal, like snack or something. And Dan is like, well, if I find out I get this job, I'm going to come back and eat that whole Santa thing up. So I'll be back. So Dan hears from a phone call that he's not going to get the job. He goes back in, watches the TV, and realizes that that the people from the future had showed up at this World Cup soccer game, I guess, to get the widest audience to be told like, hey, like there's a future war going on and everyone needs to be tied to this. And so very much after this we start to see that a ton of people are being sent out to the future to eventually just die. Sadly enough, like there's a lot of people who are forcibly being drafted to this future war, and so a lot of people don't have choices. A lot of people are often being picked because of their specific age range. So I'm like, oh, okay, so that's like there's a whole like science behind this that when Dan Forrester is to be in school and starting to talk about certain topics about science and stuff like that, and a lot of his students are instantly disinterested just because it's like, what is the point of any of this? What is the point of learning any of this? Like, the world is going to end anyway, so what is the point of giving us any kind of education or knowledge or whatever? It's just going to go bubkiss nowhere because the world's going to end. And Dan is like, well, hey, like, if anything, really what we're going to need in the future is scientists. So you guys need to get as smart as you possibly can so that way you can help us in the future. Like, that's what I'm here teaching you. That's what I'm here for. And so there is this one kid who is to, I believe his name is Martin, and he is to be this guy that wants it like, hey, teach me, I want. And so Dan is like, okay, Martin, like, go ahead, what do you have for us today? It seems like this one kid is a kid who just loves to spout out knowledge about volcanoes. It seems like this kid is so knowledgeable that he is to know every little thing, every little detail about volcanoes, and Dan is like, "Well, great. Like hopefully this comes in handy some part in this movie, which we'll find that out." So, Dan is going through class, and eventually he is getting a emergency alert that he needs to go to where they are drafting people because Dan had gotten drafted. So, excuse me. So Dan goes to this military spot where Dan is going and like getting his like body being like put through machines and all kinds of stuff, and through this machine Dan is to find out that he is going to die 7 years from now, and Dan is like, so what now? Like and so like the military is just like putting him through all these machines and like hooking him up to things, and he's just like, but what's actually going on? Like what does anything entail? Like what are we doing? And you're going to get a lot of that through this movie. You're going to get a lot of times where like the military is just going to tell Dan like, hey, go here and sit here and that's what you're doing. And Danny's going to be like, but what like what like what am I doing? Like, because really, I think also Dan was easily picked because he had gone and done a tour in the military. Yeah, I think, suppose he had mentioned that was like 15 years ago, but anybody that has any kind of military experience or just any random person that has any kind of skill that may be in a benefit to be sent, they're being sent, but also they have to be sent when they are probably going to die before the actual uh, war is to happen, so that way there's no like conflict uh, with past self meeting future self, and then they can get future knowledge and whichever. But eventually, that might happen anyways, because luck of the draw. So Dan is to get this huge like Captain America like bracelet looking thing on his arm, and then they're just like, okay, we'll see you later. Like we'll call for you in like a 24-hour like span to get you like technically briefed, but really what their brief means is like, hey, here's a gun. Hey, like we'll kind of show you how like to use it, and like what you're supposed to hit specifically, but no one actually knows what they're actually up against. Like there is no photos being sent of what these certain aliens are to look like. I think they call them uh like white fangs or something like that. It's like, I don't know the exact name. I think they're called like white something. Um and I think there might actually have been like, let me pause here and let me see if there's a name here in IMDb. White spikes. Hopefully, hopefully immediately, because it took me a while to find out frickin' like the name of this thing, because I was like, yeah, like this movie like just came out today, so like the information isn't going to be easily found. So white spikes is the aliens that they're to go after. So going back into this, so Chris Pratt is to eventually get this huge bracelet that's like basically takes up a bulk of his entire, like from wrist down to almost his elbow. Like that's how long these things are. And uh and so immediately we have Emmy, who is Dan's wife, that is to kind of counsel a lot of people that are to come back from this war, and a lot of them are very frazzled. And so Emma is to go to Dan, and Dan is to show Emmy that he is to have the giant bracelet on, and Emma is like, well, like, we need to get this off of you. We need to run away. We need to something, because if anything, like, these guys have been coming back just utterly broken and shaken and whatever from all of this. So, like, you need to figure out a way to get this off of you, and then we'll run. We'll, like, run wherever we need to go. And so Dan is like, well, there probably is one person that I can take this to, and he might figure a way to get this off of me, and that's actually my father. Dan, during this Christmas party, was to get his mail and realize that his father had sent a Christmas card that he threw away in the trash, saying that he didn't want to deal with it, or he didn't want his daughter to get a Christmas card from her grandfather. So there's something to do with that, which we'll get to that when Dan is to meet up with James Forrester. So Dan goes to James Forrester and is to kind of show him his wrist, and James is like, okay. Like, James starts looking at it and starts, like, kind of fiddling with it. And so Dan is talking to James and, like, talking about the past, how like, James mentions how, like, there were, like, a lot of troubles between him and Dan's mother, and also James mentions there could have been any time where Dan could have called out for help from James, and Dan didn't do so. And Dan is like, well, yeah, because there had been numerous decades that I had, like, tried to ask for your help, like, especially help, like, burying my mother. And so you were never there. So I guess you're just going to be, like, not here to me now. And so Dan puts back whatever piece that his father took off of his uh, large bracelet to just say, well, like, I guess I'm just going to handle this myself, like I've always handled everything. And so Dan is to walk off. So a lot of people will immediately say that this is going to be the last time we're ever going to see J.K. Simmons, but it's not going to be true. Especially if you've seen this whole movie, you'll understand exactly what I mean, but pushing on. So Dan is to eventually just go, like, yeah, like, there's nothing I can do. Like, I'm just going to have to go and just do this, and, like, I'll come back. I'll come back. Like, I'll be the only probably one that might make it back, but I'll make it back. So Dan is going off to have to forcibly go into this boot camp with all these people, but really they're not going to do anything to train these people that'll, like, be wasting time. Like, they're not going to have them forcibly go through obstacle courses or any kind of other kind of gee-donkey like things. They're not going to put them through any kind of real true boot camp. They're just going to, like, tell them the least amount of stuff it'll take for them to survive, and then send them on their way out to the future, because they just don't have the time. They just have to repetitiously just keep sending these guys out. So Dan is to instantly connect with a guy named Charlie, a guy who is to have to forcibly be wearing, like, military like pants, but, like, he is to be able to wear his camouflage like coat. And so we have Charlie, who's kind of just sent here as kind of like almost the comic relief, as kind of the guy that is to go here and, like, do some goofy things, or, like, be the one kind of guy that were like, ha 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 ha, like, during the movie or whatever. So and of course, like, Dan has to kind of show Charlie, like, what the heck, like, he's actually doing, because Charlie doesn't even know how to, like, do his gun. Like, so eventually, once these guys get huddled up together, like there are some people that get to know who they're going to be like tagged with or who they're going to go together with. And so there's some people that are just like, hey man, like I'm in your sector. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like we get Nora, or we get Kawan or Cohen, who is like, hey man, I'm with you guys. It's like, okay, cool. And so, of course, that we get like red shirt guy Dorian, who is to just be like this dead silent guy who is telling everybody to shut up and like, because he's just like, he's been through too many tours of this and he doesn't want to make friends. Like, if anything, like he just wants to survive and that's all that matters to him. But eventually, Dorian does have a backstory, and we'll get to that eventually once uh, we get through here. So, eventually, meaning that some people are going to survive at some points because, like, there's a reason why Dorian is as good as he is. So, pushing on. So, eventually they are getting set through this room to eventually go into the future, and so everybody is still kind of freaking out because they're like because I guess they were sent well too early to not even get the proper amount of training, because that's what happens when like a future war is breaking out and people quickly die. Like people are just consistently being sent out like it's like nobody's business. And really, if anyone were to try to escape or try to run away from this, there is no way to do that. Like, you have to be like, you'll get sent either way. So there is no like dodging this. There is no getting away from it. Eventually, people will track you down because evidently the tracking device like is keyed up to your heart monitor. So, what is to be told is that they have 7 days into the future, and if they are to still be alive by those 7 days, they will be sent back to the past. But so, like, if these people can survive for 7 days in this horrible future, they will eventually get sent back. So immediately, these people get like basically like shot out into like the sky of this like wormhole thing to take them into the future. But all of a sudden, we have these military people that are like, oh my god, like we sent them to the wrong location. Because eventually, when these people are to be sent back, supposedly they're supposed to land on some beach, but instead they're just landed on this like skyscraper where there's like pools and stuff like that. And probably a number of people just immediately just died while they were to make their way to this spot. But luckily, a lot of people landed in this pool and were able to have this like safe kind of like uh, you would have thought that they would have perfected that, but I guess not, because I guess they just don't know what the heck they're really doing. And so, like, a lot of people had to die because of that, because of their stupidity. But, like, I guess that figures when you, like, send way too many people back, like, way too rapidly, you're probably going to make some mistakes. And surefire enough. So, Chris Pratt is to land into this pool, luckily, because, and so are a lot of people just luckily landing into this pool. Some people are smacking into the spots by the pool, and then some people are just smacking into buildings and falling to their deaths, sadly enough. So, luckily, some of the people that they kind of set up through this movie, like, survived, because really, I guess a lot of people were just gonna be like, well, the people that they didn't set up easily gonna die, because who gives a shit about them? They're all extras, sadly enough. Like, I also saw that Theo Vaughn was in this movie, and I was like, oh, great! Like Theo Vaughn, like a lot of people might know him from the real world, and Theo Vaughn has his own like YouTube channel where he goes into like certain dialogues about things, like talking about his experiences with drugs or life or whatever. But like it was interesting to like see that he was in this movie, but I didn't know exactly where he was in this film. Probably in some background part of this movie, but moot point. So they are to get to this building, like Transformers would say, get to the building. Sam, get to the building a billion times in that film. So, uh, so Dan and all the people that we were to already have invested in are within this building. And so we find out that Roman Commander is like asking if anybody's alive. And Dan is like, hey, yeah, I'm here. Like, what's up? Like, where are we going to be sent? And so Romeo Commander is to tell Dan, like, well, hey, luckily you're right around the spot where we had a bunch of scientists who were to put together some information. And so we want you to go and intercept this building and see like what kind of threat is there and take it out and then grab these scientists and get the heck out of there. And so Dan is like, okay, like, all right. So like we have Dan and then we also have Dorian. Like Dorian is kind of taking his men and going his kind of route, and Dan is kind of taking his people and he's consistently like giving them tips while they're going along. And Dorian is like, dude, they don't need tips. Like they're just gonna die anyways. And Dan is like, well, like I'm keeping them alive. Like I'm trying to tell them something to keep them alive. Like if anything, like people like did not get training whatsoever, so I'm telling them little things here and there to keep them alive. Cuz Dan does not want to leave a man behind, and eventually that will kind of blow up in his face, but still like Dan like wants to keep everyone alive and like keep them like to have some kind of equal chances survival as he probably would. So eventually they get closer and closer to this spot. Eventually Dan takes both Nora and Cohen to run up to like be scouts to kind of see if there's any enemy threats there. And so they don't spot anything at first. So they basically just go right into the building that they're supposed to go into. And eventually they start looking around to find out that every single one of the scientists have just turned into like basically just animal meat or alien meat. And basically they're all dead. So Dan is to call up Romeo and be like, hey, yeah, just a heads up, like all your scientists are toast. So what do you want me to do next? So Romeo just says, well, like just get all their data, just get all their information, and then get the heck out of there. Because eventually there is to be a like a strike team, like a bunch of jets like firing off missiles at that location, because this spot is a hot spot for this threat. So Dan and everybody are scrambling to get this data, and so they have everything, and then they're getting out of there. And so they are decide like both Cohen and Nora are to mention because they're outside, kind of watching things, and they're to say, yeah, like we're getting some alien threats out here. So Dan is like, well, okay, get back into the facility, and we'll figure out another way out of here. So they make their way up the stairs as everybody has the data, and so like Dan is thinking about going down this stairwell that they were at, and they're like, no, don't go down there. So they're like, okay, we'll just go to the opposite end of the building and try to make it out there, because Romeo is to tell them to do that. So they go into this stairwell, and so they're like kind of looking up and down, like kind of like checking everywhere to see if there's an alien threat either like above them or underneath them. And eventually they start to go down this stairwell, and eventually they are to see this alien threat. And so at first we see this alien threat by like its little like it's one of its little like tentacle things that is to I guess spot some people, and then we are to see this thing's face come into the frame. And then that's when things just start popping off. And so that's when we start seeing everybody like crazily just shooting and then just making their way down these stairs. We see like Charlie who is just like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, like shit, shit, shit. Like we have this guy like cussing up a storm, making his way down every single step, saying shit along the way. Uh, so everybody is to make it out of here, and but man, do they have to like really try to take these things down. Like it takes quite a few bullets. Like it takes probably a whole round of bullets to take down one of these things, one of these white spikes. So so eventually like Dan is trying to get like everybody out, and like he just starts like shooting behind everybody to just like, dude, get out. Like I'll take this thing down. Eventually there's one of the white spikes that is left there, and so Dan decides that like there's so much of like close combat quarters that Dan instead decides like, I'm not going to waste any more bullets. He decides to break a like one of those emergency like fire things to get an axe out of that, to go and like swing at this white spike, but immediately like the white spike maneuvers, and Dan hits nothing. So Dan then goes and like hits the axe to go up, and then the white spike is to get hit with this, but then like we start to have people like coming back and starting to fire at this thing, and to try to get Dan and everybody out of there because they're waiting for him. Also, like they are on also a time limit, because eventually there's going to be an airstrike that is going to make their way and plop a lot of bombs down. So it's like a race against time for all these people to get the heck out of there and get as far as humanly possible. So these people are running off and just scrambling at this point. Like everybody is almost going off on their own, but yeah, like everybody is just freaking just scrambling at this point. So eventually there are to go in these spots where there are like little gaps, and Cohen falls through one of these gaps, and so they jump down to try to go after him, and Dorian is telling Dan, it's like, dude, this is a waste of time, don't go after that guy. Like if anything we could all make it, but like we're going after this one guy who's going to be against this whole threat. Because it's kind of interesting, like these people walk directly into the one spot that they're not supposed to, because that's the only way that they can get anywhere, because there's threats all around them, because because the commander is to tell them not to walk directly into the red smoke, and that's exactly what they do, because like they're running around like they're hitting like a chicken with their head cut off, and they're like, where do we go? Everywhere there's just a threat everywhere, and we just need to just go one freaking route, because there's no way but to go to the one place that they told us not to. But anyways, so eventually they go down into this like tunnel location where Rowan and Nora are just kind of getting hit, and so there's no way for either one of those people to get picked up or dragged or whatever to get to safety. And so both Cohen and Nora are just saying, hey, like leave, go without us, we'll shoot these things off so that way you guys can get to safety. And so of course these things get pelted, Nora and Cohen die, Dan and everybody go off to eventually be just be like, okay, well, hey guys, you're the ones who made it. Good for you. So they are to get picked up to be put into the military base, and so Dan is to kind of mention to Dorian, who is still alive. It's like, well, hey, like, what happened to everyone else? Because eventually we just see every one of these people all in this medical bay for one reason or another. And so Dorian is to ask, like, hey, what happened to everyone else? And Dorian is like, well, hey, man, like I'm sitting on one of them. Like, all these guys are all dead. Like, they're just shoved in these, like, kind of briefcase-ish looking coffins just because they're dead. Like, there's too many freaking bodies. Like, they're just coming up with like convenient ways to just put all these characters into some coffin somewhere. So eventually, Dan is to finally confront Dorian and like mention him. It's like, hey, like, why have you gone on so many tours of this? Like, why have you consistently gone and done this? Like, and it just seems like you're like you're not really a team player. You're just kind of like out for yourself. And like Dorian is also a person that is to take like souvenirs. He is to take eventually pieces of the white spikes and make like necklaces out of them. And Dorian is like, well, yeah, like this necklace, this is a reminder about what I'm going up against, and also it's a reminder of that that I can choose the way of which that I want to die. Because Dorian is to tell us that he is to have cancer and supposedly he's going to die in 6 months. And that him doing this consistently is him being able to control when he dies. Instead of going and dying in some hospital bed somewhere, he can die in battle. He can die in war and control when he dies instead of having somebody tell him when he's going to die. So that's why he consistently goes there repetitiously to die off, because it's either he's going to die in battle or he's going to die in a hospital bed because of cancer. So like that kind of is interesting. Like I like that kind of like there's a whole reason why this guy is doing what he's doing, and I was like, oh, okay, so there's actually importance to a lot of these people. And like there's quite like some moments here and there where this movie is kind of sad. But anyways, so Dan is to eventually go off and meet his Romeo commander, like meet her in person. And so he's going and having a talk with her. And while this movie was to play out, I'm like, I know exactly how this spot is gonna go. So uh so Romeo Commander, like there's a reason why they gave her a code name. And so when Dan is talking to Romeo Commander, it seems that while one of her um, military coworkers were talking to her, she said the word Colonel Forrester, and Dan is like, "Well, hey, no, I'm not a colonel. Like I'm just like some guy. Like I'm a foot soldier." And then Dan has it start to click within his mind to just be like, "Oh, like I'm not Colonel Forrester. You're Colonel Forrester." We find out that that Romeo Commander was actually leading her father to stay alive. And I was like, wow, like I was like, you know what, that was kind of predictable, but you know what, I guess I can just enjoy that. Like we have to naturally assume that there's going to be some kind of past and future connection, and here it is. So Murray Murray Forrester, uh, Murray Murray. Let's go with that. So Murray Forrester is actually like Dan's superior, which I kind of laugh at that. So Dan is to, while both his daughter and him are in this helicopter, because they are to try and go after this queen white spike to try to capture her so they can take this thing from her. Like I want to call it like a vaccine or some kind of like venom or something from this alien to try and have it affect uh, a early stage of these aliens to try to kill them off before this war is to actually start. So they're kind of doing that route where they're trying to find the queen, kind of like in Starship Trooper, where they try to find the queen alien and try to uh like because she's like this smart bug, and like she is kind of telling everybody what to actually do, and she like sucks the minds out of all of her enemies. But like this white stripe character doesn't have like a unique skill set compared to everyone else. Like if anything, she's probably just more durable than any of the other like aliens, but that's about it. So so Dan is to, because I'm trying to push on as much as possible. Like Dan is to eventually try to pry some future knowledge from uh, Muri, but Muri is to basically say, well, like I can't, like the less that we talk to one another, the better. And so Dan is like, okay, fine. Like as long as I know that you're my daughter, and like as long as you survive, like that's all that matters to me. Because Dan tries to ask Muri. There's no two R's there. Muri. Let's go with female Forrester, so I can get this correct, and I don't have to question it the whole entire time. So, uh, so female Forrester is to, or let's go with Romeo Commander. Let's go back to that. So, Commander is to tell Dan, it's like, hey, we should not like exchange information because eventually you'll just like she'll get emotional and Dan will get emotional, and it's just not the right time for that. So Dan is to go with Romeo to, or Commander to go to this mission. And bizarrely, they have Dan like sit out. He's just like kept into the helicopter while everyone else goes out and risks their lives to like try to get to this queen. Like she, like they go and showcase that it seemed like kind of the way that this queen is acting via the other kind of species in this kind of like infrared kind of thing where they kind of showcase exactly where this thing is, so they go after it. So all these guys are to try and to tether this alien and try to get ropes around her to try to like figure out how to like drag her into this cage. But it just seems like everybody is just like having a heck of a time. They're just kind of really they're really just staying in one place. They're not really moving that where anywhere, because really it kind of feels like this queen is controlling them and where they're going, instead of these guys are controlling where this alien is going to go. So Commander goes down onto a rope to try and figure out how like she can muscle this thing. Like she like uses her bulletproof vest as like this shield, and she tries to like push this thing into this cage. And so Dan is starting to see some white spikes popping up. And so Dan is just jumping onto this rope and sliding down because he's like, like I'm not gonna let my daughter die. And on top of that, like if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do something. So Dan kills all the white spikes that are coming into this hole, and then Dan slides down to try to push the white spike into this cage, this queen white spike, with his daughter to just push this thing in there, and so they get it to be in the cage. And so the helicopter just takes this thing and drags it out to, like, I would call it this like water world kind of spot, because it seems like all the military force decided to make this like giant oil rig like thing in the middle of the water and have like a gate build around it, like kind of like it's basic. It looks like a water world kind of scenario, and so they figured that like it would take any of the aliens like forever to get to this spot to try to do any number of things to try to take this place down. And immediately, I guess they also just assumed if there were aliens making their way there, like they could easily evac because this place is out in the middle of nowhere. So once they get the queen, and now like there is a bunch of like science like being like put together with all this. So like this is where this movie like starts to slow down, but eventually there's this big action sequence, but then eventually the movie even like slows down even more, in all honesty. So so uh murray 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 and Dan are to spend time together trying to inject drugs into this queen so she's consistently docile. And so they start taking this like venom or vaccine something from this queen, and try to do a percentage of bonding to have some kind of specimen that can be take back and that could be take back blah, 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 that could be take back into the past to try to stop this whole alien thing from popping off before it is to actually happen, and figure out how the aliens actually came here so they can stop them before it even happens. There we go. So, and that's why Dan was kept alive, because they were hoping Dan would get kept alive so eventually he can bring back this vaccine esh like thing before the war even popped off, so they could put this thing in all the aliens to kill them all off before this war even like gets really far off. So they're kind of thumbing through the percentages, trying to get a perfect match. Dan and his daughter are having dialogue where Dan is mentioning like, "Hey, so in what year exactly does the Miami Dolphins go to the Super Bowl and win? Like, and and what is the spread?" Because like bizarrely, I guess we have both James and Dan, like father like son, who are still I guess rooting for the Dolphins, and so Dan is just asking his daughter, his future daughter, "Hey, when do the Dolphins make it to the Super Bowl? Like when do they win?" Like like he's I think really just Chris is just kind of making a joke, and like kind of like trying to do the whole Biff thing, like trying to get certain information about the future. So, because what eventually happens is when both his daughter and Dan are to eventually try to leave via this helicopter, eventually it does not work out to where both Dan and his daughter have to go and jump into this military vehicle where Dan's daughter is firing off at all these white spikes, and Dan is driving. And so they eventually stop at this beach, and uh, and Dan is talking with his daughter. Finally, she reveals some stuff about the future where Dan supposedly had left them. I guess just like his father. Uh, Dan had divorced Emmy, and so then Dan had got into a car accident and sadly died. Like that's exactly how Dan was to live out his next 7 years, via divorce, via going off on his own, and eventually dying in a car accident where his daughter was there to see him die on his or on her supposedly 16th birthday. So so much I have to know about this movie, but let's push on. So, and that's what leads up to them going and finding all these matches, and Dan trying to get as much time with his daughter as he possibly can. Ba 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 ba. So, right as they are to come up with this 100% bonding match thing to say like, yeah, we found it, we found this like thing that's going to beat all these aliens, that all we need to do is just shove it into their body, and like they will decompose. They will Thanos snap if that is what to be. But you have to put them in every single one of these white spike things, and or they won't die. So, but I guess maybe if you kill the queen, you kill all the other ones. But the queen has babies, of course, so that's the real thing, the real legitimate thing of just they have to kill this thing basically off anyway. So, but they have to go back in the past to do it. They can't do it in current time. Like this war has already costed so many lives that like now they have to figure out in a way via the past to try to stop this whole thing from happening. Cause now we have like the real Starship Trooper moment where like this watered world place is being overrun by aliens, and we just see all these guys just firing away, just popping off at these guns, and all heck is breaking loose. Like we have these white stripes just all over the place, and so Dan and his daughter are just running through everywhere, trying to find if there's a helicopter to get them the heck out of there. Dan is starting to see his wrist, and it's starting to like kind of tick down that he is to only have 55 seconds left before he is to come back to the past. And because like his daughter is to eventually remind him that he is to only have 7 days, and Dan is like, well, wait, like I want more time. Like I need more time. Like I need like I want to be here like long. Like we need to find the match of this thing, and I need to come back with a real solution of this. And like we haven't found that yet. And then once they find the 100% match, lucky around the same time that Dan is to go back. So Dan and his daughter are scrambling all over this like this oil tanker-ish like water world spot. They're just running through everywhere because all these aliens are everywhere. So they're like trying to like make a defense and try to like hold out as long as humanly possible. And so Dan's daughter is to eventually get hit by one of these white spikes. And so now Dan is like, you are not going, like, I'm not going to leave without you. Like, you are going to survive this. But then, like, Dan's daughter cannot move. And so Dan is like, well, hey, we're going to just chillax here until, like, you can move and we can go. Like, so we're going to relax. Like, as everything is, like, burning up and, like, blowing up behind them, Dan is like, hey, we're just going to relax here, and we're going to just, like, eventually get ready to move. But, like, we're just going to just hang out. And so Commander was talking to Dan, mentioning, like, it's so great to see you, like, at the time, because like this is where I really want to truly remember you, like from this time, not watching you die like back then when like before everything happened. And also Commander had mentioned that she was thinking that Dan was the only one she could trust to send this thing back to the past to like save everyone. And so all of a sudden a white spike is to come and get to Dan and get to Dan's daughter. And so eventually we see that they're fighting this thing off, but at the last second, Dan's daughter is to like start to slip, and a white spike is holding on to her, and Dan is like holding on, like, no, like you like you stay alive, you stay here, like, but his hand is slipping, she's falling, And Dan, right before he is to go back, is to see his daughter die horribly and awfully, but die other way. Anyways, so Dan is to go back to the past with the future weapon, the little green test tube of stuff that is to be the thing that is going to wipe these aliens out. So here's the thing. So Dan is to go back to the past, but I guess the time traveling device to go back into the future, I guess, is completely unoperational. It's done. Like they can't send anyone else back to the future because that thing is donezo. So let me pause here for a second. Let me do a little bit of a reset. All right. So now we're going to the more even sciencey parts of this movie. And man, is that gonna get a little bit of ugh. So Dan has come back to the past, and so he eventually is to see who eventually is to make it, and Dorian is to still make it, Charlie is to make it, and Dan is to be sitting on a bed next to Charlie, and Dan is, oh, you made it, and Dan is like, yeah, like I hid. It's like, yeah, like anybody probably would have been scared, and anybody would have probably gotten outnumbered, and anybody would have probably just been like, dude, I know, like this is a pointless endeavor. And like once Dan is to go back, he is starting to see like rioting in the streets. Everybody's looting because it's just like, dude, the world is gonna end. Yeah, it might be 30 years from now, in like 2050, but still, like the world is eventually going to end. There's nothing that we're going to do. So what's the point of anything? It's kind of like the kids that are in school. They're just like, what is the point of going to school anymore? What is the point of education? So, so Dan is to take this thing and have them figure out eventually, like, Dan has to kind of figure out how exactly this whole thing was to, like, how he can take this weapon and take these aliens out with it. And Dan and Emmy are to talk to one another because Dan is to see his wife and he's kind of shaken and he's kind of like, you can see some kind of post-traumatic stress going on there because eventually everyone gets like really shaken up, like even like when J.K. Simmons towards the end of this movie, you can see like his hands are just like shaking, but he's just like, I can do this. Like I can freaking whoop all kinds of butt. Let me go ahead and do this. So, uh, so Dan goes back to his wife and tries to figure out how exactly they can use this weapon. And so Emmy is like, well, all we have to do is figure out like where is it exactly that the very first spaceship landed and like come up with the origins of where these aliens came because there won't be that many of aliens then to go and wipe these things out fairly early. And Dan is like, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. So Dan goes to Charlie and they are to figure out that it seems that these aliens have kind of bits and pieces of certain kind of volcanoes from certain parts of the world. And so they're like, well, where the heck is this thing going to be then? And so Charlie is like, well, if anything, we probably need an expert on volcanoes to eventually figure out where exactly these things are from. They're either from Russia or from Japan or China or like one or two other kind of locations or whichever. And so uh and so Dan is like, okay, well, I know a volcano expert. And so we take Dan to his class to immediately ask Martin who was the volcano expert. Hey, look at me! I have another thing to talk about volcanoes. And so, like, immediately, if I were Dan and I were this kid's teacher, I'd be like, dude, A. A plus for this year. Like, you can, like, do whatever the heck that you want for the rest of this year, but you'll still get an A. Like, I guarantee that to you. Because this kid just, like, busts out this freaking, like, laptop. He's like, laptop! Because he's like, dude, I know everything about what you are asking me. So this kid narrows it down to where this alien ship must had to have arrived in Russia through this like volcano or whichever during this like certain kind of event that and blah blah blah. Moving on. Uh, so they push on to try and get someone to fly them to Russia, and so they immediately go to the military. And this military guy is like, you know what? Like, I have rioting in the streets. I have all kinds of things that I have to deal with. Like, if anything, like, I don't have the time to deal with somebody being flown to Russia and all these kind of like. I don't have time to do clearance. I don't have time to do all of this stuff for you. So you go and find your own way of doing this. And so Dan is like, okay, so we just need to have somebody fly over illegal airspace to just make our way to Russia to take this alien ship down. And what would be the one person that could do that? And so they immediately go to J.K. Simmons' character, James, because James has been putting together airplanes for some rich guy. And so I guess that's the perfect guy to come back to and say, hey, we need your help. So Dan comes back to James and is like, hey, we need your help. And James is like, great, like, let's go do this. So they give him the 411 about what the heck that they're all supposed to do. And it all just sounds like a bizarre-ish concept for a movie. But Dan explains it all to James. And James is like, okay, whatever you just said there. So they get all kinds of weapons and they send everybody on this plane. So Charlie is bizarrely goofing around with guns, and he's not actually putting bullets bizarrely in his guns, which I think is weird. But so we push on to go to Russia, and so what ends up happening is they find Origin alien spacecraft in some part of Russia, and so they go and weld off this hole to get into this alien ship, and so they find these sleeper pods where all these aliens are, and so they instantly go and inject all of these aliens, but like they don't quickly have every sleeper pod handled, so they kind of eventually have to rush and try to like hit every single one of these sleeper pods to eventually get every single one of these aliens. So eventually some of the aliens start to awake, and Charlie and James are handling if any alien is to get out of this plane to try to murder and pop them all off. So Charlie is to realize that his gun has no bullets in it, and he's like, oh crap. So James is starting to like fire off at some of the aliens, but James is like, Charlie, I need your help. And so Charlie just grabs some saw that is to cut through one of these aliens, and then James is just like, oh my god, like, good god. So eventually Dorian is deciding that he wants to blow up this ship so that way a lot of these things will get wiped out. But eventually a queen or a female alien is to make it out of here and out of the ship. And so Dorian and the future people decide to stay on the ship and blow the ship anyways, and Dorian is saying like, yeah, like I can decide when I want to go, and so he goes off, blows the ship. Like I paraphrase what he said there because like he said that some quote before, and now he said it here, whichever. So Dan is rushing out of the ship, and now he has to take care of this pregnant female uh, white spike, and so they like repetitiously start shooting this thing. Like, man, they put so many freaking bullets into this thing, it's ridiculous. Like, Dan is trying to use every single bullet he has to his disposal. James is using every single bullet he has to his disposal. Charlie is off doing F if I know, because eventually he just plops back into frame, and I'm like, what a moron. But also, like, he's there for comic relief, so give him points for that at least. So, Dan and James just start running, like, eventually they get to a point where they can barely see where the female alien is, and so they pull the X-Men Wolverine Origins move, and they go back to back because like there's some kind of like snow ash like fog to where they can't exactly see anything. Like there's snow that is kind of gusting so much so that way they can't see much, because there's sometimes when it does snow where like snow is coming at you like so hard because of wind, and like the snow is so small that you can't exactly see much like in front of your face, because you would much rather just consistently close your eyes, because that's just a thing. So Dan and uh, Dan and James are kind of like back to back, and they're kind of like, "Do you see anything? No. Do you see anything?" And so they keep asking one another this, and then eventually the Queen is coming to fray. They start putting bullets into this thing, and really that it just leads them to just forcibly like go like almost hand to hand combat with this thing, to where like they just have these like small esh like knives, and they're like, well, I guess we'll just use this now, cause and so Dan is just like slice his hand and trying to get the alien to come at him, but like James is also to try and sacrifice his life for his son. And James is like, you know what, son? Like, I'm sorry for everything that I ever did, and like this is me trying to make up for it. And so James tries to sacrifice himself to go and try to take down this alien queen, but Dan goes and jumps on top of it to just be like, "No, Dad, you're not going to sacrifice your life. I'm still going to take this thing down." So James is repetitiously trying to like slice the neck of this thing, just try to like repetitiously just hit it as much as possible. And then before this thing is to fall off the edge of this like cliff edge like thing, Dan is to take this one last like green weapon thing that was off the test tubes and inject it into this thing, so that way it Thanos snaps away and it dissolves and it dies. So that is to seemingly cover everything, and so both Dan, J.K. Simmons, and Charlie are all just in this little like a huddle together, like just laying into the snow, just like, yeah, I'm just gonna take a break here. Like we're exhausted. So eventually they are to fly back home, and this whole alien thing is done, wrapping up. And so once people are to figure out what had all happened and that this whole thing is resolved, all of a sudden, like the military guy that was telling Dan and all these guys to go on their own and figure out some way to solve this whole thing by themselves, is taking credit for putting this whole thing together. And he's like, no, I sent them all out there because I knew that this thing was popping off, and I found out about this, and I sent them out there. And so this military guy is seriously taking credit for him, like, for him saying that, like, oh yeah, like, I was the one that, like, solved this whole thing for everybody. Luckily, I was the one who figured this whole thing out. They should have never went to that guy. They should have just been like, dude, I'm just gonna go on my own and do my own mission. F that guy. But they probably wouldn't have gotten like the future people to come with them. So still, so Dan is to go back home and now is with Emmy and his daughter, and he's still just kind of like processing everything, and eventually Dan is to go and see his daughter, and his daughter has a welcome home sign, and Dan just is like, oh wow, this is a great sign, but if anything, like, let's put this sign off to the side and let's just hug it out, because if anything, like you might be dead in the future, so let's hug it out right now and just show how much that I love you. So Dan is to also have James meet this family, I guess, for the first time. And so James is to hug his granddaughter, and like what a just an emotional moment. And like that's the way that this movie just ends, with them just like solving this whole thing. Everything, I guess, is going to be back to normal because they are like, well, okay, like I guess the world isn't going to end because somebody took something out and figured out what to do. Thank God. So everything is back to normal and everything is wrapped up with this movie. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.